Thank you, Jim, for the kind introduction, and it's great to be back at the Government Affairs Forum series. We're thrilled to be a long-standing partner with the Chamber on this, and look, I hope everyone had a great end of their summer. It was good to see a pickup in traffic around the city for most, at least a lot more foot traffic, and we look forward to more of that as the year progresses. Before I introduce our special speaker today, I just want to acknowledge Jim and his staff for all they do in convening us with key government leaders throughout the state, but also how they represent the business community and advocate on our behalf throughout the year. You do a fantastic job, and we really are thankful, Jim, to you and your team. So now I'm honored to introduce today's featured speaker, the Mayor of Boston, Michelle Wu. And in 2021, she became the first woman and the first Asian American and the first person of color to be elected into the mayor's seat here in Boston. It was quite an accomplishment. She was first elected to city council in 2013 and then was unanimously elected to the president of the city council in 2016. She continues to be a champion for accessibility, transparency, and community engagement. Mayor Wu is also a former restaurant owner and legal services attorney. She also served as a Rappaport Fellow for former Mayor Menino and as constituency director for the U.S. Senate campaign of Elizabeth Warren. In 2016, Mayor Wu was honored as one of the 10 outstanding young leaders by none other than the Greater Boston Chamber of Commerce. And in 2022, Time magazine named her as one of the 100 next national leaders. So we're very fortunate to have her as our mayor, and please welcome her to the stage.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Welcome back to fall. I am so honored and delighted to be with you all this morning and to see so many of Boston's leaders, movers, visionaries here in one space. Thank you so much, Michal, for the very generous introduction, and more importantly, thank you for what you and your team at Bank of America do every day. We are particularly excited. I know you all are doing and partnering with the city in a lot of ways, but thank you for accepting the baton from John Hancock. And by the way, I bet Brooks is in the room somewhere, as I was with him yesterday, as they have embarked to deepen their work on health and longevity in a really exciting direction for the city. But to have the Boston Athletic Association secure, and shout out to Jack Fleming, who's in the room as well, this will be an exciting new chapter for the city in the greatest race in the world. Thank you to Secretary Howe for your leadership and for your constant presence and making sure that the city and the state are working hand in hand on issues that are important to this room and so many of our communities. I'm honored to be here with my colleagues in elected office as well. I heard State Rep Bill McGregor was in the room, and at least at the thank you for your leadership, and members of the Boston City Council and state legislature. We're so excited for what's ahead for our city. There are former elected officials in the room in many, many different roles, and we're grateful for your service. And of course, the leaders within our administration, cabinet members and department heads and officials who make this work possible every day. Thank you. And most of all, thank you to Jim. Thank you to the entire board and all of the staff and team at the Chamber for convening us for this really exciting and important chance to be together and for today's discussion. In my household, and I think there's maybe a few others out there who are parents of young kids, so fall is especially exciting because school is back. We get to leave behind the kind of improvisation of summer, the go with the flow of whatever might happen, and bring back the structures and the rhythms of having some organization around the school year. And this gathering also helps to mark the annual post-summer return of our regular rhythms in the business and economic community of Boston. And this is a community that I've really, really appreciated and valued getting to know even more over the last 18 months. If nothing else, I'd like to reinforce today what I'm hearing from so many of you. On an even broader scale, the rhythms of our city and economy are returning. Boston's recovery is going strong. And I want you to know that we at the City of Boston are committed to doing whatever we can to keep that momentum going, creating the conditions for Boston to grow and to grow sustainably. So I want to start with some of the data that I've been looking at. At Logan, more international passengers passed through our terminals this June than in June of 2019. The MBTA's Fairmont commuter rail line saw an all-time high in its ridership this year. And between Q1 of last year and Q1 of this year, there's been a 70% increase in all commuter rail trips. That's the biggest growth year over year in commuter rail ridership of any major city in the country, outpacing New York, Philadelphia, Chicago, Dallas, everywhere. And those are just our transit numbers. The news coverage might not have caught up yet, but the reality is that we have seen the highest growth in post-pandemic hotel occupancy of any city in the country. Our friends at the Downtown BID, the Business Improvement District, have recorded 29 consecutive months of year-over-year growth in foot traffic. And retail is coming back too. Downtown, our retail vacancy rate is 20% lower today than it was a year ago, while our overall retail vacancy rate is currently just 2.6%, not just lower than the national average, but much lower. New York is at nearly 4.5%, Philadelphia at nearly 5%, and Miami at almost 3.5%. This week on Monday, the Associated Industries of Massachusetts, AIM, released their Business Confidence Index report for August. And businesses across Massachusetts remain cautiously optimistic as our economy continues to grow. Last year, the Boston Licensing Board issued more licenses for businesses in 2022 than in 2018 or 2019. And our unemployment rate is at a record low, half of Washington, D.C.'s and a full percentage point below the national average. Total payroll employment in Boston is higher now than it was pre-pandemic. Professional and financial services employment up by 6% since 2020, and consumer spending in local neighborhood commercial areas is well above pre-pandemic levels, with spending in neighborhoods like Roxbury, East Boston, and Rosendale up by nearly 20% compared to 2019. And we're beginning to see what the numbers bear out, that the city feels more alive as more and more companies choose Boston as the place to do business. Since January, we've seen Alonia and Archaea Bio add new labs in the Seaport in Charlestown. Cycle Wash moved to Boston from Germany. Auto Return came to us from San Francisco, and CRISPR crossed the river from Cambridge. Just last month, Toast, a $13 billion company, announced it would not only be staying in Boston, but bringing its corporate headquarters right here to our city, keeping it in the city and in the Seaport. And of course, we're all very excited that Lego will be moving from Connecticut, where they've been for nearly 50 years. 700 jobs coming to Boston in the heart of Back Bay. These examples aren't the exception, they're the rule. In the first quarter of this year, more than 40% of all research lab space under construction in the country was being built right here in the Boston metro area, and we continue to lead the country in NIH funding. The numbers speak for themselves. Boston has mounted one of the strongest recoveries in the nation, and that's not an accident. A recovery like ours doesn't just happen on its own. Our resilience, our competitiveness is cultivated very intentionally and through a lot of hard work from people in this room and beyond. This is a product of a concerted effort to make Boston the best city in the country for families and for the businesses they depend on, work at, and run. It's a product of programs like our Space Grant, Legacy Business and Cultural Investment Grant programs, led by our Chief of Economic Opportunity and Inclusion, Shagun Itawu, and his team. As they have distributed over $11 million in funding to more than 60 businesses across our city, from bars and restaurants and dance studios to barbershops and roller rinks. And it's a product of our broader investment strategy from City Hall as well. We've committed over 200 million ARPA dollars, more than 40% of our total federal recovery funding, to building more housing to ensure that our residents, your workforce, can afford to be here and thrive. And our recovery is unquestionably a product of the leadership in this room. All of you who, in collaboration with government, nonprofit, and philanthropic partners, recognize the value of investing in our communities and being present. I want to give a special thanks as I talk about everyone who's helped us bring and have a hugely successful NAACP National Convention to Boston this past summer. In particular, folks like Jim, Bob Rivers, J.D. Chesloff, Brooke Thompson, Jay Ash, and many others here helped us engage new partners even in the last few months and weeks before convention goers arrived. M&T Bank, Citizens, Lego, Putnam, so many others helped make this convention a huge success. I'm also talking about Boston Scientific, Takeda, Sanofi, and all the others who joined many of those same sponsors to bring the National Association of Asian American Professionals National Leadership Convention here just a month later. I want to thank Fidelity, who hired 400 Boston residents to their team this year and launched their Invest in My Education program, pledging $250 million to help Black and brown students pay for college or certificate programs. Eastern Bank created an Equity Alliance for Business to provide women entrepreneurs, people of color, veterans, people with disabilities, and members of the LGBTQ+ community with specialized credit offerings and loans of up to $250,000 for their businesses. Blue Cross Blue Shield, Boston Children's, Point 32 Health, the Mass League of Community Health Centers, and the many others who joined the Boston Public Health Commission formed the Health Equity Compact, filing legislation to address deep disparities in health outcomes in Boston and across our Commonwealth. Our partners in higher education, who have reaffirmed their commitments to fostering diverse, inclusive learning environments in the wake of the Supreme Court's affirmative action ruling, and Mass General Brigham and UMass Boston, who announced a $20 million investment in July to add 40 nurses to the workforce right here. You all are the muscle behind the strides that we as a city have made since the pandemic. And over the course of this year, I've had the opportunity to sit down with dozens of our CEOs, many of you here today, and heard a vigilant hopefulness about how far we've come, that you're seeing good signs. You're watching the state tax package, have an eye on the ballot initiatives. Housing and transportation continue to be challenges for your workforce and for you. But you believe in this city and care about it. And so you're here, investing in our communities and eager to contribute to a Boston that doesn't just bounce back to what it was, but pushes forward into all that we could be. So I want to say thank you for your partnership and your vision, your willingness to dig deeper into solutions and aim higher in our standards. And I want to acknowledge that we at the city can and will be doing more to streamline processes, create predictability, and collaborate with all of you on creating new ways to drive sustainable growth. This summer, we announced a new office-to-residential conversion program that will offer up to 75% reductions in the standard residential property tax rate for up to 29 years. Chief Arthur Jemison and the BPDA are just getting started, and we're excited to begin accepting applications for that program next month. It's not the solution that will revitalize our downtown, but it's one of several strategies that we're deploying to ensure that Boston's downtown isn't a neighborhood that empties out at the end of the workday. It's also part of our broader commitment to thinking creatively about how the city can help advance sustainable development, create more housing, and serve as a co-investor in housing production at a time when financing that production is a real challenge. Since our administration began in the fall of 2021, we've permitted nearly 7,000 units of housing, almost a third of which have been income restricted. In January, we announced that the city would be giving away land to developers who would deliver maximum public benefits on city-owned parcels. And since then, we've released requests for proposals, RFPs, and begun working with developers to turn vacant lots, parking lots, and unused buildings into affordable housing, public open spaces, and retail. Some of these parcels will be quite significant in the size and the capacity and for density that's available. These parcels include Parcel 3 and the Boston Water and Sewer parking lots in Roxbury, as well as parking lots in Chinatown and Charlestown that are also close to public transit. We've partnered with local banks represented in this room to launch a homeownership and down payment assistance program that's helped more than 300 families buy homes in Boston so far. Thanks to the work of our Chief of Housing, Sheila Dillon, and Chief of Planning, Arthur Jemison, and all of their teams, we've approved nearly 900 new homes to be built in Boston just in the last month alone. And there's a pipeline of over 23,000 more approved, ready to be built. But in large part, because interest rates are the highest they've been in 20 years, we're not seeing those approvals translate into shovels in the ground. We need city government to be as effective a partner as we can be in this moment and making sure that we're continuing to build as many homes as possible. So I've spoken with business leaders, real estate developers, academics to better understand the tools that Boston could use to accelerate housing construction. We've consulted leading experts and economists to evaluate our options for targeted investment in housing production at a time when new home construction remains incredibly difficult to finance. And based on these conversations, we are strongly considering a time-limited tax incentive program for housing creation to sustain the momentum we need to see in our housing pipeline. In the months ahead, we will continue to sit down with stakeholders to analyze our options to get shovels in the ground faster and finalize the parameters of a potential policy. And we invite your collaboration as we finalize and think through the pieces of this. Another major way in which we're removing barriers to growth and development is through modernizing our zoning code, which hasn't had a comprehensive update in nearly 60 years. Later today, we're releasing a report authored by Cornell professor and founder and director of the National Zoning Atlas, Sarah Bronin, that confirms what we've all known here for a while now. Our zoning code isn't just outdated. It's long, dense, and internally inconsistent in ways that make planning confusing, unpredictable, and costly. Under the current code, even minor changes to a home or business often require hiring a lawyer to navigate the nearly 4,000 pages of legalese, and building a new triple-decker in most neighborhoods requires a variance, even if they're already lining the street. Our planners have been so bogged down with development review and rezoning that there's been little time for them to engage in the thoughtful, long-term planning that our city needs and they would like to move forward. So today, we're also announcing the restructuring of our planning department to kick off the long overdue reform of our zoning code and to give city planners the capacity to plan for Boston's future with communities. To that end, we're excited to be launching our Squares and Streets initiative, a citywide rezoning effort to create mixed-use hubs along our neighborhood main streets, close to transit and with opportunities for more housing, retail, and civic spaces. We'll kick off our community engagement process at the Dorchester Open Streets event this weekend and conduct outreach through the end of the year. sending our teams to businesses, concerts, farmers markets, and events across the neighborhoods to get input from all of our residents, not just those who are most able to show up at a public meeting. The resulting plans will cut what has historically been a 3 to 5 year process of rezoning down to 6 to 9 months and make our planning overall more transparent, collaborative, and predictable. And because we believe that our youngest residents should be the focus and they deserve the highest quality of opportunities, we know that raising a family shouldn't be a disqualifier for building a career. And so Chief Jemison and the BPDA have also been working very closely with Kristen McSwain, Director of our Office of Early Childhood, to propose a set of amendments to the zoning code that will make it easier to create childcare facilities throughout our city. These amendments will make childcare facilities as of right in every neighborhood, bringing daycare centers and family daycare homes to communities where no options currently exist. For working families, it is hard to overstate the impact of these changes. More high-quality, affordable childcare options, shorter commute times, and more opportunities for working parents. I also want to take this opportunity to share 2 additional examples that show how we are working and how we're thinking about streamlining processes and eliminating bureaucracy as a barrier to responsible development. First is our inclusionary development policy, and the second will be about the Inspectional Services Department. So IDP. For developers, filling those affordable units can be time and cost intensive. And for residents who need housing, the existing lottery system is basically a black box. You hear nothing for months, and then suddenly you're notified that you have 5 days to get all of your paperwork together in your life to be considered. In the middle of our housing crisis, this means that some affordable units stay vacant for months, even after the rest of the building is occupied. We're changing that. When a unit has been built and is ready to be filled, we will have a renter or buyer ready to move in on day 1. Starting tomorrow, we'll be doing away with the application request forms for prospective residents. No more filling out forms just to request to fill out more forms. We'll also be updating our website to include a list where prospective residents can see their exact position in line for available housing. For developers, we're cutting our current 68-page marketing and tenant selection plan down to a 5-page form. And the city will be taking a more proactive role in spreading the word about available units. Instead of requiring developers to spend 16 hours near the development site handing out flyers, we will host information sessions across our neighborhoods and take on the advertising requirements that previously fell to developers. Together, these changes mean fewer hurdles for developers and more clarity and quicker connections to much-needed housing for the residents in our communities. Now, ISD. We will be hiring a new intake supervisor position and reinstituting our fast-track permitting program once that position is filled. Before that program was discontinued during the pandemic, fast-track eligible projects would get stuck into a plan examiner's pile with all of their other obligations. So while some projects were eligible for fast-tracking, it often didn't matter because they'd sit in that pile on someone's desk for weeks. This time around, we will not only have plans examiners rotate on taking fast-track shifts to ensure these projects get the individualized attention and expedited approvals they need, we'll also be running building code reviews and fire prevention code reviews simultaneously to prevent either one from becoming the bottleneck. As a result, building permits for office renovations that currently take up to 4 weeks will now take no more than 7 days and as little as 20 minutes. Finally, I know you all don't believe that it's gonna happen. I'm hearing the skepticism. Finally, I wanna close with some thoughts on an issue that is foundational to the success and well-being of any city. One that I know has been on our minds, and especially as we're thinking about the nationwide landscape for recovery: public safety. First and foremost, I want to make clear that here, as in so many other areas, Boston stands out among our peers. If you look at the national data for the last full year available, in 2022, Boston had the fewest reported incidents in almost any category, including loss of life and homicides. Many of the cities that are our same size or considered in the same categories are dealing with the trauma and impact of almost 10 times greater the scale. And it's not just that we are seeing the numbers lower than other cities. In this moment, Boston has been seeing this kind of trend in our own city for decades. Violent crime is down nearly 10% compared to our 5-year average and was down 11% this summer. We've had the lowest number of shootings in more than 10 years, and this year, shootings have declined by 17% so far. I want to thank Boston Police Commissioner Michael Cox for his day-to-day leadership and the understanding I've gotten of the work that he does. But I also want to emphasize here that every time we speak about public safety, when we look at the news, when we see that other people have been impacted, when we see the numbers and put them up on boards and rankings, these are not only real lives and whole families and communities who are forever impacted, but as the numbers reset every year, the trauma and the grief and the continued impact continues on in our city for our families. And so we need to all do more in ensuring that we can provide the resources and the infrastructure for trauma supports, for that holistic approach. There is someone in this room who I'd like to highlight who has been doing this in name as a nonprofit leader for a long time, but she is basically part of the infrastructure of City Hall and city government and has been for decades. Chaplain Clementina Cherry. So many of you all are already involved in the work of the Louis D. Brown Peace Institute, or you might have heard of or attended the annual Mother's Day Walks for Peace. That is an incredible effort and mobilizing force that happens every year because of Chaplain Cherry and her team. What I want to emphasize today is that all of the years that she and her team have been doing this work in providing nation-leading guides and protocols and working with our hospitals and providing educational curriculum in our schools to really focus not just on ending harm and moving on, but really getting at the roots of peace and healing. She is embarking on a huge endeavor that the city of Boston is going to be there every step of the way to build for once the building and facilities that the Louis D. Brown Peace Institute deserves. They're kicking off a capital campaign, so please, she's wearing bright red today. I hope everyone goes and sees her afterwards. Is it $21 million we're raising? $25 million we got to get to make sure that our survivors and families and cities finally have what they need. Okay, sorry, back to my script. For those of us who care about creating long-term, lasting safety in our communities, we know that getting there means following a set of collaborations that has made our economic recovery as successful as it's been. Working to mobilize the incredible resources that already exist in our city, and then to invest in our people. Commissioner Cox and the department and all of their partners across every part of city government, and the Boston Public Health Commission and our first responders, BCYF and schools, they've taken this approach to community safety holistically. And this is also how we are taking and planning our approach to the crisis of homelessness, substance use, and mental health at Mass Ave and Melnia Cass Boulevard. Since January of last year, hundreds of people who have needed services have received those services and moved on to life-changing new journeys in the low-threshold housing sites wrapped with medical care that we have created, the first ever in Boston, and now the state creating more in 6 other cities modeled after our work. More than 160 people in just this time have not only reached that first step in their recovery, but stabilized, transitioned, gotten job search supports, housing, counseling, to now living in permanent, stable housing. But as more people from across the region have arrived at Atkinson Street, Southampton, and everywhere around the Newmarket Triangle, it's become clear that a compassionate, comprehensive, long-term solution requires rebuilding the Long Island Bridge and Public Health Campus. It also means addressing head-on the individuals who see the area as a place to exploit those who are struggling with mental health and addiction. That's why late last month, we initiated a phase change for the Masson Cass area and the city. We filed an ordinance with the Boston City Council to interrupt the violence and criminal activity enabled by tarps and tents, which currently the protocols require an extended period of time before Boston Police and our health outreach providers can address. We need to have that capacity to move immediately to provide more safe, stable, low-threshold housing and coordinated implementation to return the streets in that area to their original purpose. Restoring Atkinson, Southampton, and the roads in the surrounding area to standard functioning roadways will unlock the potential for more effective outreach and services all across the city. And it gives us the opportunity to lean into the untapped possibilities of this neighborhood as a thriving part of our growing city that can create more jobs right there for the individuals who are needing those supports. Imagine if Masson Cass, as a term, was instead synonymous with Boston's newest climate tech district, home to the country's largest and fastest growing collection of green jobs. Imagine if the individuals who needed services were connected directly and our city teams from BPD, BPHC, and our partners in community could have the supports to do these jobs safely. Because safety and opportunity are directly connected, we're tying together all of this with our planning. And so our recently released plan by the BPDA, focusing on Newmarket, begins to take us in that direction as we pair with these efforts around public health and public safety. And because safety and opportunity are directly connected, I want to reinforce that every opportunity we create for industry should also be an opportunity for our future workforce right here in Boston. This summer, we had aimed to double the number of city-sponsored summer jobs to 7,000 for our young people. Thanks to leadership from our Chief of Worker Empowerment, Trin Nguyen, Senior Labor Advisor Lou Mandarini, and the partnership of Neil Sullivan and the Private Industry Council and many of the companies in this room, we not only met that 7,000 summer jobs high mark, but actually pushed to more than 9,000 high school students. One small example, just one person, Cindy Alfaro Martinez, is a student at East Boston High School, and she spent her summer in the CEO's office at Vertex as an intern for Reshma. And if you're thinking, that sounds like the kind of opportunity that could change a student's life, you are right. It's exactly the kind of opportunity we want to create for every single one of our Boston Public School students. So the ask, as predicted, is for all of you to start thinking now about what your organizations can offer for summer of 2024. We are going to get well past the 10,000 mark next summer. And I want to acknowledge and thank Jim and the Chamber for their work directly with Superintendent Skipper to analyze and assess and soon to be finalizing and putting forward ways for employers to more efficiently and effectively collaborate with our schools and engage with our students. And also, Jim taking on many hats as usual, helping lead the charge as a co-chair on our Madison Park Vocational Technical High School Steering Committee for new programs, career pathways, and partnerships with what will be a nation-leading vocational technical school on an expanded campus in the heart of Roxbury to produce the next generation of our leaders and workers. All of what I've discussed and all of what we will talk about in a little bit are not small goals. We won't achieve them overnight. But our administration isn't interested in quick fixes or cosmetic solutions that will then just go away after the cameras disappear. The challenges that matter most for our city for our communities, our families, are long-standing and complex, and they deserve lasting solutions. These solutions will require creativity and collaboration and demand that we're not satisfied with just returning to the way things were, but pulling all of us forward into what we could be. As we set our sights on that future together, I am so grateful to know that we can count on every person in this room and all of the leadership that you and your organizations represent. Thank you.
Turn these on.
Test, test.
Okay, we're on. So, Mayor, I do have some questions, but I do want to begin by saying thank you for such a positive and uplifting speech. You know, you and I have talked about the fact that you as mayor of the city and my role as chamber president, we spend a lot of time talking about and dealing with challenges and responding to questions about those things. But you know, once in a while, it's good to just take an inventory of sort of where we are, how far we've come. And thank you for reminding this entire audience of all that's good about our city. So thank you for doing that. So I almost hesitate to ask some questions focused on challenges. I mean,
No, dive right in.
Anyway, let's start with yesterday was a preliminary election for the Boston City Council. By my count, I think there'll be 4 new city councilors at least, unless there's a surprise. Again, without looking back, let's look forward. What's your hope as we enter 2024 for a new reconstituted Boston City Council?
I think what we're seeing in politics everywhere, and a lot of the headlines that you read, not just at the city level in Boston, but everywhere, is really a reflection of the kind of destabilized moment that we're in national politics. There's a lot that has been very uncertain for the last couple years in people's lives, and frankly, some of the policies haven't caught up or been responsive enough even pre-COVID, and then it's been an all-hands-on-deck focused on just making sure everyone could get through the pandemic. And now we're really at a turning point in many ways. What does our recovery look like? How do we envision and build a city that people can actually afford to stay in? How do we get the decades of deferred maintenance on our public transit system onto a solid plan that we can all be a part of and know? These are big, big challenges. And you know, as someone who, I'm having flashbacks because 10 years ago, almost to the day, about a week or two away, was my very first election when I ran for the city council. And comparing what the kind of feeling in politics and government was then to today, there are a whole lot of external challenges that make it very difficult for anyone with a public platform to be in this moment. And there's just whether it's climate events that can come out of nowhere, earthquakes or floods or storms or economic challenges that really feel outside our control in many ways. There's a feeling of trying to grasp onto where can we find that stability, and that can manifest in a lot of chaos and kind of not functioning properly, or it can manifest in a real shared commitment to say, let's build the momentum, seize the political will, and get things done. And I think, I will never give up on the Boston City Council. I will stand by the importance of this institution, how fundamental it is. There's nothing like being able to just call up your district city councilor and know that any little issue should be the most important thing for someone who has the power within city government to make those connections and get things done. And I think what we are seeing is, as we transition as a city, as an economy, and as a government, the focus really has to be, how do we marshal a focus on achievement and progress and accomplishment? We're not gonna fix everything overnight. We're not gonna achieve perfection. But even the steps that Boston will be able to take, in some ways, are steps that other cities are dreaming of, and that we can help set the standards. And I know city government has a real role to play in partnership with you all.
Okay, you opened up the door to my public transit question. You all knew it was coming. After years of working together, quite frankly, to get Boston a seat on the MBTA board, we did it. So now you have the ability to appoint someone. So talk about how you hope to use that seat. And maybe I'll throw in my second T question. You know, we've seen slow zones and the challenges that filling is facing over at the T, announcing shutdowns of different segments. You've been close to the issue. You and I talk about it very regularly. Do you expect that that's part of our kind of next few years? A week shutdown here, a month shutdown there?
Yes.
Okay, there you go.
I think, you know, when it gets to be this state of deferred maintenance and infrastructure concern to the point where the federal regulators are stepping in and saying there are, you know, extraordinary measures that need to be taken to address this, it means we have to either choose to kind of compress and take it all in and do our best to get it done quickly, or it will stretch potentially indefinitely, and at that point we're, again, even the infrastructure is even at an age where that is not even a realistic option just in terms of how long rail ties and other things can last. And so it's a huge accomplishment for all of our commuter population, and I believe for the region that Boston will have a direct voice in really making the connection to an agency that is funded by a statewide legislature and government, and therefore has very different pressures and incentives on the revenue side, but then has to deliver services in a way that are so concentrated in the center city and the metro area. And so what do we hope to do? I think, sure, there will be some opportunity to lean in and think about the big picture, although we're now in a wonderful, wonderful place in terms of leadership with Phil Eng, finally to have someone with the transportation background in that role for the first time in a decade, to have the state officials who are in charge of transportation very, very experienced, even with the transition that's happening. I just actually met yesterday with acting secretary, or newly sworn in Secretary Monica Tibbetts-Nutt, who came from years of serving on the MBTA board herself. And it'll be issues like, how do we ensure that the little changes that affect Boston, for example, the commuter rail fare prices being constructed around a very outdated ring approach, so that when you get on the commuter rail at Forest Hills to go into South Station, for example, it's the price of the T, but if you go 1 mile further to get on in Rosendale Village, it's nearly triple the price. And of course, then people are driving just within those neighborhoods in Boston, such a small thing that would dramatically change how people choose to take transit. Identifying these issues around the bus system, or how to manage and engage residents when we do have to deal with the reality of temporary shutdowns, and getting through that so we can just be on a path and track where the system is getting to where it needs to be. It's going to take a while. We will be loud and forceful alongside you all, but we're in a much better place, I believe, right now than we've been in a long time in terms of everything coming together.
Well, the way we price mobility is probably right alongside zoning in terms of being outdated. So we've got some work to do there. And Monica, by the way, is fantastic. And we're on a roll, another 10 outstanding young leader recognized by the chamber. So we're doing pretty good. Boston Public Schools, you know, near and dear to my heart. Mary Skipper is, I think, doing a tremendous job in her role at the Boston Public Schools. So we haven't heard a lot about this, but the state, I don't know what form of intervention they took. I don't know what the technical term is.
The school improvement plan. SIP.
Yeah. So we haven't heard a lot about it, so sometimes no news is good news, but can you give us an update on how that is going?
Yeah. So the document that was signed really before Superintendent Skipper was even formally chosen to be in that role, now dating back to June of 2022, outlined a series of buckets of deliverables, most of them with a time frame that would go for the next year and a half from when that document was finalized. Those are anything from fixing up certain number of bathrooms and getting those renovations on track, to really a focus on bus transportation and on-time performance, and rethinking how we can improve access for students with disabilities and English language learners. I would say, so the process and the structure is that every single week, the state and Boston Public Schools are meeting and going through what needs to be done. They are providing a tremendous amount of technical support and advisory resources, which has been very, very helpful and meaningful. And then the city, as we are completing and meeting these deadlines, is checking things off the list. We see this document as a necessary kind of, at that moment, again, different administration, different moment in time, it was a helpful way to really be clear about what each side's role was in the partnership. Our vision for Boston Public Schools, if you talk to Mary Skipper, it fills up this room and beyond. And so just getting buses there on time or having bathrooms that are functional, that is not what we aim for with our students. It's the partnerships that you are helping to create with so many in this room. It is the opportunities for the whole city to be their classroom. I would say that some of the big changes that have already started to bear fruit have been a year and a half in the making, and many of them will probably be another 3 to 5 years in terms of really revamping how our special education system works and how our different processes are all handled. But we are well underway in working through that school by school by school, classroom by classroom. I'll just give a quick summary, because oftentimes there is a whole set of stories at the beginning of the year about school buses and how they performed. Each bus is equipped with a GPS tracker, and so you know exactly where it is, and parents can follow when the bus is about to arrive and when their child actually got to school. And so we also know exactly what time the buses arrived and dropped off those students compared to the start time that they're expected. And so that measurement for the first day of school, I was on one of those buses. It's a little iffy. You don't know if some students are dropped off more on the first day. We waited at a stop because a young girl was late running over, and then that made the route late. So it's always a little bit squishy. Last year, the on-time performance for buses getting exactly to school on time was 50%. This year, we were over 60%. Last year, by day 2, it was in the 70s. This year, we were at 85% by day 2. And so we're going to continue. When you look at how many buses arrived within 15 minutes, we are well on our way to doing much, much better. But that's not just we're committed and we're gonna make it happen kind of thing. It took a year and a half to reconfigure the school bus driver's contract to have some operational reforms and accountability and supports. It took building a new pipeline that the district runs themselves to get people trained up in the CDL driver's license needed to drive a bus versus just searching around for who might have one. It took more new requirements in how our communications processes work between schools and the district and families. And so all of that is continuing to build. And so some of it might seem like we're still laying the foundation in many ways, but as we go month by month at this point, we're starting to see real results.
Great. I did see Mary, I think on the day 2 or 3, and she was beaming about the on-time performance of the school buses.
Yeah, I mean, this year
it's a little thing, but
I'm channeling the superintendent, but we had the lowest turnover in school leaders in decades this year. We are at a 97% vacancy rate for teachers, which is unheard of. So many of these areas, a lot of work has been put in.
Yeah. So I'm going to squeeze in one more question. We're almost toward the end, and this is a bit sort of parochial on my part because you know where I live. And, you know, the planning
yes,
effort...
the snow plows do too.
The planning effort around South Bay and Newmarket, I think is big. I think you projecting a vision for what that district can be in the future is so important, and I commend you and Arthur Jemison for putting that forth. And I know there's a lot of interest in this room in contributing to sort of making that vision a reality. So I don't know if you want to add any more about that effort, but I just think it's terrific.
Yeah, and I'm sure, wait, where is Arthur? I saw him. Okay, if Arthur wants to add anything as well, please jump in.
Arthur's in the room, if people want to add.
Arthur's in the room. And this is an area of the city and a kind of critical segment of our economy that many, many folks have been planning for and thinking about. As a city gets to a point where housing prices are at a certain level, where the nature of the economy overall is shifting from some of the more blue-collar patterns of several decades ago, there's an existential question for light industrial and manufacturing. Do we make a real effort to keep that in a certain part of the city, or do we let it go and get pushed out to surrounding areas or even further where there might be lower rents available, but then our residents and our workforce are also displaced, and we lose the kind of direct connection and creativity and mix that can come from that density and diversity and heterogeneity all in one place. And so there's been a real effort through the BPDA and others in this room for decades to really think about how Boston, even as we transition in many ways, can hold on to and cultivate what it means to preserve those jobs in the context of the new economy and a more kind of innovation, information-focused economy, right? There's a whole separate set of discussion we could have on AI and what it means in this sector and many sectors everywhere, and we are launching into some of those conversations as well, thinking about an advisory committee, so I'll put that out there as something for collaboration if anyone is interested as well. But in this area of the city, we are committed to making sure that it is the place where those jobs can stay. And it will be a mix, right? It needs to evolve, and there's some challenges around mass and caste that are certainly part of that. But if we think about how Boston will differentiate itself with those who are in that area and have been putting forward this vision for a while, that overlap of light industrial with the information and innovation economy in the space, somewhere like a climate tech, hard tech kind of hub, would allow us to preserve but also build and differentiate ourselves in a way that could be really special. And I know folks like John Fish have had a vision for this area and been fighting for it for a very long time, right? Locating your headquarters there long before anyone saw potential there, and I think we need to follow that with many of the resources and parameters so that we're making the most for everyone in our city.
Well, Mayor Wu, thank you for the positive energy that you bring to this job and to the room today. Thank you for your willingness to face the challenges in a collaborative way with the business community and partner in the way that you spoke about earlier in your speech. And we look forward to giving you even better numbers to report next year. Thank you, Mayor Wu.
Thank you so much.